Welcome back to The Real Story. It's Jeanne Ives here. Thanks for joining me on this Sunday night. It's Mother's Day, and I really appreciate that Congressman Darren LaHood has come in to give us a discussion about what is going on up in Washington, D.C. I've been wanting to talk to Darren for quite a while because there's a lot of activity there, and I know that voters, I know that taxpayers, I know that most people pay attention to what's going on at the national level. So really appreciate Darren taking some time tonight to talk to us about these important issues. Darren, of course, is an Illinois Republican congressman from Peoria. He serves the 16th Congressional District. Prior to that, though, he spent 4 years in the Illinois State Senate, 9 years as a state and federal prosecutor. He also worked for the DOJ as an assistant U.S. attorney in Las Vegas and as a chief terrorism prosecutor. There's a whole host of issues that we could talk to Darren about. But what we're going to talk to him because he serves on the powerful House Ways and Means Committee. They have jurisdiction over your taxation and revenue issues. So we're going to talk to him first and foremost about that big, beautiful bill that President Trump once passed. It is sort of in a logjam. It seems to be slowing down. I know that the Hill and numerous other agencies have been reporting that House Republicans, quote, this is from the Hill, are falling further apart in negotiations on a reconciliation package that represents President Trump's first-year legislative agenda. And they say they have just weeks to go before their self-imposed deadline. And that's critical. It's a self-imposed deadline. Some of the conflicting areas seem to be how to cut Medicaid and raising the SALT deduction cap. Darren, listen, we just want things to get done, and we want those tax cuts to become permanent. What is going on with this negotiation?
Well, Jeanne, first of all, happy Mother's Day, and happy Mother's Day to all of your viewers out there that are celebrating today. Always good to be on with you, Jeanne. Thanks for all you do to continue to promote good public policy and hold elected officials accountable and all your conservative values. Grateful to be on with you. You're exactly right, Jeanne. We are debating putting together the one big, beautiful bill. And I do serve on the Ways and Means Committee, and I'm fortunate enough to be part of that process of putting this bill together. If you go back, Jeanne, to the election last November, which seems like years ago, but I argue the president got elected on two issues. One, fixing the unmitigated disaster at our southern border, and secondly, the economy. And if you look at this one big, beautiful bill, we take care of two things in there. First and foremost is the economy. And next week, we're going to have a hearing on the Ways and Means Committee that's going to release this bill, and we're going to have a debate and get it through the Ways and Means Committee. The House is moving to get this to a vote, I would say, in the next 2 to 3 weeks here. And we predicate the bill, Jeanne, on a couple things. One, we want predictability and certainty for our economy. We want, there's a lot of companies, small, medium, large businesses, family-run businesses, farmers, that want predictability and certainty when it comes to our taxes. If we do nothing this year, we're going to have $4.5 trillion of tax increases because of expiring provisions at the end of this year, 2025. So it's imperative that we pass this. And if you go back to 2017, when we passed President Trump's first tax bill, I would argue it created the best economy in my lifetime in what we did. We brought the corporate tax rate to 21%. We brought, for small and medium-sized businesses, down to 21%. Also, we cut taxes for working families and working individuals, but we didn't make a number of things permanent. So foundational to what we're doing right now is we're making permanent what's 100% bonus depreciation, which every small business, whether you have 2 employees or 20 employees, have. We expand the research and development tax credit. We expand 199A. We expand the child tax credit. We also make permanent the estate tax. So I know I'm throwing a lot out at you there, Jeanne, but those are what we're working on. I would say we're in agreement as Republicans on 90% of that. The tough part is, you mentioned it, SALT, how far we go with our cuts, because, we have an obligation and responsibility to make significant spending cuts. And there's some disagreement on that, but the president wants to get this done. Don't underestimate the power of the presidency to get this done. We've seen already this year with a couple big votes, the president's weighed in. This is his signature piece of legislation. The last point that I'll make, and then happy to get into questions and comments.
Sure.
Part of this bill will be codifying provisions at the southern border, like remain in Mexico, which the president has used through executive order, getting rid of catch and release, which Joe Biden implemented to allow 11 million people to come into our country illegally. Those are going to be part of fixing or codifying the executive orders that President Trump has already put in place. Because what you've seen is border crossings are down 95% because of those policies and because of what Kristi Noem and Tom Homan and the DOJ are doing to enforce the rule of law. We need to codify that. That'll be part of this bill also.
Well, I mean, that is the other thing that's very interesting is that this isn't just about tax and revenue. It is about these other issues. Could you tell us what are some of the ancillary issues that are also in this big, beautiful bill? For example, is he codifying anything that deals with the DOJ effort? Is he codifying anything that deals with the DEI efforts to strict that from anything that the government deals with? Are those parts of this as well, or is that going to happen somewhere else?
Absolutely. Spending cuts are going to be a part of this. And many of the provisions put forth or the suggestions put forth by Doge and Elon Musk will be a part of this. Remember, Jeannie, we're $36 trillion in debt.
No.
If we want to have these tax cuts, which are going to be huge for the private sector and for the economy and the free market system, you got to offset that with spending cuts. Think about it this year, Jeannie. In FY 2025, which we're still in, we're going to bring in roughly $5 trillion. We're going to spend $7 trillion, partly because of the Biden prerogatives from last year. That's unacceptable. So getting our spending under control through Doge, through those rescissions that Elon Musk has given us, that'll be a big part of that. You mentioned earlier salt. Now, we have not resolved salt. As you know, we got rid of the salt deduction in 2017. This time around, we have a number of members that want to increase that deduction up to maybe 30% or 40%. That costs a lot of money. And there's a lot of concern by fiscal conservatives like myself that we can't incentivize big tax states like New York, New Jersey, Illinois, California to continue to engage in these policies. And frankly, it costs a lot of taxpayer money to do that. So I am resistant to expanding the SALT deduction, very high. And I think a lot of my colleagues are also, but that's going to be an issue that the president's going to have to weigh in and we're going to have to deal with. Lastly, on Medicaid, there's been a lot of resistance to that. Now, what I believe on Medicaid is we ought to take able-bodied adults that are on Medicaid. We ought to move them into jobs. We have 7 million unfilled jobs in the country right now. And a good way to get rid of that Medicaid, the spending we do on Medicaid, is to move people into these jobs. And so there's going to be an effort here on work requirements, on changing how we do TANF, on getting people off of Medicaid and into jobs. The best social service program is a JOB, a job. That's going to be part of this package also.
Well, I applaud you for holding fast because to be an Illinois congressman is to actually get beat up by the left, especially in saying, why aren't you in favor of raising the SALT deduction, especially here in the suburbs? People feel that way. But as we just, found out last week, Adam Data Services did a property tax study. And of course, what's the number one county for the highest property taxes in the entire country? Oh, it's Galesburg area. It's Knox County. So, you also have rural counties that are hit by the SALT tax, but you are definitely right. The SALT deduction is a problem at the state and local level. It is not a problem at the national level. And I wish your New York Republican congressman would figure that out. And the messaging on this should be so easy to do. By increasing the SALT deduction, you are bailing out millionaires. That's essentially what you're doing. They want to tax the rich, and then they don't want to tax the rich. And this should be just an easy messaging point, in my opinion. I don't understand why people don't understand things. Also, let's face it, that Tax Cut and Jobs Act essentially got rid of a lot of people getting hit by AMT, alternative minimum tax, because the deductions were so much higher that so many people couldn't even use the SALT deduction now, given the new increased deduction amounts that came out through the 2017 cut.
Jeannie, let me just mention one other thing on the reconciliation bill.
Okay.
We're going to gut the IRA, and we need to do that,
good.
the Inflation Reduction Act, because it has a bullseye on it, and it should. Remember, it was passed in a blatantly partisan way by Biden, the new Green Deal, as they called it. But there's going to be huge cuts to that, and there should be. We're not in the business of subsidizing industries. We're not China in the sense that we don't have state-owned enterprises. We don't subsidize our industries. And so there's going to be an effort to have significant cuts on many of these mandates that were put in there, many of these boondoggles that were done for the green credits. And so there'll be, that's got a bullseye on it. And that could give us savings of $450 to $500 billion, almost $500 billion. So that needs to be significant cutback. That will help to pay for the tax cuts for working Americans.
Okay, that's terrific. All right, Darren, I was really concerned when I read this Illinois Times article written by a friend. Scott Reeder's a good guy. He's a good reporter. He put out this piece about the major solar development opens in Sangamon County. And of course, area leaders tout jobs, tax revenue from the double Black Diamond solar farm. This is going to be the largest solar power development east of the Mississippi. It's going to be on 4,000 acres. 4,000 acres. It's going to generate apparently 800 megawatts. That translates to powering about 100,000 homes. And this was land that used to grow corn and soybeans. All right. But I got to tell you, I know what they're getting off of that land. Those people are getting $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 an acre. And the governments there are excited because they're going to be receiving $100 million. $1 million of tax revenue in the first year for the taxing bodies in that area, and $100 million over the life of the project. This, why they're getting that much? Because it's heavily subsidized by the federal government.
Well, absolutely, Jeannie. If it wasn't for the IRA, again, the boondoggle Democrat, and I'm not going to call it the Inflation Reduction Act because it didn't do that.
Right.
So I don't even give them the credit of using the name. But that solar farm that you just talked about would not be happening if it wasn't for subsidizing that industry. That's the bottom line. And that's why it's more imperative than ever that we get rid of those credits, which fund projects like this. And as you alluded to, taking prime productive farmland out of production is ridiculous because of a subsidization. This is, not allowing the free market system to work the way that it should. And it's more reason than ever that we need to gut the IRA and get back to our free market principles. And as you well know, Jeannie, we've also seen other, CCP related companies that have abused and used these tax credits. I think that's going to come to an end here one way or another. But again, there's been a manipulation and use of these IRA tax credits by China and others that's just simply unacceptable.
Well, you've been really good about taking on Gotion, and I appreciate you. And you do serve on the Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party. So I wanted to see if there were any updates there. But I also did want to know, what is the status of your No Gotion Act?
Well, our No Gotion Act is been reintroduced by John Mullenhour, Senator Rick Scott in the Senate, which is great to have him as an ally, and a number of others. And we are moving forward. We're moving forward. And as we've talked about before, Jeannie, if we look at what Gotion has engaged in, they're basically trying to use federal tax incentives with a battery-operated plant in Kankakee, Illinois, and also up in Green Township. And our legislation, up there, our legislation would obviously prohibit any CCP affiliated company from using these tax dollars and put them out of business for any type of qualifying green energy production tax credit that were put forth in the IRA. So I feel good about that. I feel even better, Jeannie, because of your work and people on the ground, both in Kankakee and up in Green Township, that have flipped their legislative bodies there at the county and municipal and local level because of the outrage here. But we continue to move forward. We're going to have a hearing at some point on the Select Committee on China to move forward on it. And I feel better than ever where we're at, but we got to make sure that this doesn't go forward. And by the way, the one up in Green Township, I'd say, is already announced they're not going to move forward. We got to make sure it doesn't happen in Kankakee.
Yes, I just had a conversation with the lawyer just a couple days ago, who is both the lawyer for the Concerned Citizens of Manteno and also Green Charter Township. And his prognosis is that they are not going to go forward whatsoever. The Gotion has been stalled out in Michigan. However, because Illinois is much more favorable ground, And what you have seen, by the way, is Gotion buying up hundreds of acres around the current Gotion plant in Manteno to probably for expansion, because they're probably going to try and actually not just assemble batteries there, but also manufacture batteries there. That would be a whole new deal, which is why it's super important that we get the No Gotion Act passed. And it's also important that we get all these incentives taken out of, circulation so that they can't get money off the taxpayers. And I want to make one more point. That massive solar farm down in Sangamon County, which is by Springfield, that solar farm is covering soybeans and corn, which Governor Pritzker, speaking out of both sides of his mouth, says, well, listen, these tariffs are terrible for our soybean farmers. We need to export our soybeans, and shame on Doge for taking away our soybean. I forgot it. It's some sort of a lobbying group for soybeans being sold across the seas. Terrible that Doge said we should take that out. And yet, at the same time, he's covering our good farmland with solar panels. So which is it? Do you want soybeans produced here and shipped overseas, or do you not, Governor Pritzker?
Well, all good points, Jeannie. He ought to be focusing on, instead of being in New Hampshire talking about running for president, he ought to be focused on fixing the problems in Illinois and the fact that we have the hugest outmigration of people leaving the state over the last 4 years here. We continue to hemorrhage people left and right, Republicans and Democrats and everybody, because they're sick and tired of his policies and how he's doubled down on spending and lack of a good business climate here and supporting sanctuary cities and illegal immigrants over the needs and the wants of working Illinoisans.
Yeah, speaking of which, I know that my West Point classmate, Brett Guthrie, he's the chair of the Energy and Commerce Committee, and I know he's been sort of talking about doing sort of a per capita caps on Medicaid funding going to these able-bodied adults that were added in with the Obamacare expansion. And I know he's getting pushback from that because people are going to message it as a Medicaid cut. That's not true. These people were never on Medicaid before, and that's not what the program was built for to begin with. But easily, these blue states like Illinois, instead of funding illegal aliens, why don't you fund the able-bodied if that's what you want to do? But certainly, the federal government should not be funding them whatsoever. It should be a state's decision to do that. And I'm all for the Medicaid cuts. And I know that may not be popular, but let's face it, there's a lot of people on that, like you said, need a job instead.
Well, Jeannie, this would be a much different conversation we were having if we were 36 trillion in surplus.
Yes.
We're not. We are $36 trillion in debt. We can't forget that on behalf of looking out for the taxpayers of my district and across the country. And if Republicans have been waiting for this day to have the House and the Senate and the presidency, and if we can't get spending cuts now and reduce that debt and change the trajectory of our fiscal country, when are we ever going to be able to do that? Now is the time to put our money where our mouth is on fiscal responsibility and implementing the rescissions package and cutting back where we need to.
Yeah, Darren, you know what? I just love to get in as much as I possibly can. So there's just one more thing I want to raise your attention to, and maybe it's something that you could raise also with your committee. This is a press release from Chairman Molinar applauding the passage of the Deterrent Act. This was March 27th of this year. Today, we're taking a critical stand against the Chinese Communist Party's efforts to infiltrate and influence our academic institutions. Well, lo and behold, what do you know? The Illinois Math and Science Academy's new principal cozied up to the Chinese when he was a principal in Virginia, and now is looking to have a partnership with the Chinese again. And just parts of what he was doing should be very concerning to Americans. He was literally going to have to turn over all sorts of information to the Chinese about research lab setups, blueprints, floor plans, curricula, thumb drives on senior student research projects, all of this in order to get some funding for an expansion that he wanted. And then they were using all this information to set up what they call the Thomas schools in China. I don't like this. And I think you should maybe put it in as part of your body of work to talk about.
Well, Jeannie, I know you sent me the article on it. I read it just briefly before we jumped on here. But listen, we can't trust or rely on the CCP or affiliated groups in any way. They mask themselves. They hide behind these names that they use. For instance, the Confucian Centers. These are some benevolent organizations that help promote, relationships between the U.S. and China. Wrong. They've been exposed. These are espionage related operations. I mean, there's hard evidence to support that. The LLC corporations and partnerships that have been formed to buy up farmland, surprisingly near military bases and other things directly tied to the Chinese. And it goes on and on and on, these benevolent organizations. This is another example of it. I'm glad you raised it with me. It will be brought up when I get back to DC next week with Chairman Mollenauer and our staff, and we're going to get to the bottom of it.
Well, thanks a lot. He's Congressman Jeanne LaHood from the 16th Congressional District. Darren, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your insight.
Great to be with you, Jeannie. Look forward to coming back soon.